Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And this is One and Done, that podcast where we review other Doctor Who podcasts. Because this week we're reviewing ourselves.
Right, trust your doctor. So if you don't know, we've had a Doctor Who podcast for the past 4 years called Trust Your Doctor, where we basically started watching Doctor Who from the very beginning, Unearthly Child, and we hadn't watched Doctor Who really before that in any large capacity. And we've watched all the way now up to David Tennant's Doctor.
Blink, yeah. Blink is
Blink.
what went out last week.
And
we just decided we're done.
Yeah, we're done with it. We're over it. Trust Your Doctor is officially over as of right now.
It's never coming back. If any of you expecting a 10-year from now reboot of the show, it's not happening.
It's not coming.
We're replacing it. We've already got Zenith now, which is kind of our flagship podcast because it gets way more viewers and feedback than this.
It's a Blake 7 podcast.
And so we just, it's not really worth it to do Trust Your Doctor anymore. So we decided we're going to replace it with a new podcast
called One and Done.
Yeah, hopefully we can fill the Doctor Who fandom a little better with this podcast. Initially we were in a pretty crowded field. It's still a very crowded field, although it's been dropping off a bit. Rest in peace, 42 to Doomsday.
Rest in peace, Trust Your Doctor.
Rest in peace, Complete Menagerie, which I heard might also be ending, ?
I haven't heard of that one, actually.
So we're thinking, maybe instead we can try and narrow the field for you. Let's review other Doctor Who podcasts. Let's tell you which ones are good. Let's basically make ourselves enemies of every other podcast because
enemies of the world, basically.
Yeah, basically because we'll be railroading into a lot of these. Probably we may, maybe we'll find some gems for you guys. But we're starting with our own podcast. We're starting with episode 1, which was titled "He's Gonna Have Celery."
Yeah. So basically what we'll be doing is we're going to go over episode 1 of the podcast we are reviewing and tell you whether it's something you should keep listening to or if it's a one and done type thing. It's the first episode. And
that's why this podcast is called One and Done. So that's where the name comes from. I know on Zenith we didn't explain where the name comes from, so it felt necessary to explain here. It's called One and Done because we only listened to one episode and then we're done.
Yeah.
Now you know, I guess.
Anyway, jumping right into Trust Your Doctor episode 1. I guess our format for this is we're going to be leading with the bad things about the episode because, well, we want to just get the bad news out of the way first and then focus on the good news. Yeah. In this case, there's mostly bad news.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was a piss poor effort, so to speak, for a first episode of a podcast.
Yeah,
really.
I remember back to, 4 years ago or so, this podcast had almost no preparation that went into it.
As if it has any preparation now. We just have more preparation.
We just have more practice.
We just have more practice.
So
yeah,
this episode starts with us just going right into it. There's no introduction.
We break every rule. We break every rule for the first episode of a podcast. And you don't think there's rules for the first episode of a podcast. And there definitely are. The rules are introduce yourselves, and then, what's the podcast about?
How did it sort of form, get made? How did you come up with the idea?
What's the plan moving forward? And then you launch into the content.
Release schedule is a big thing.
And we did none of those in the first episode.
You also want to have a social media presence, have your website finished before putting this thing out. Also, not what this podcast
You also
did.
want to have the website and the hosting ready when you record the first episode and not a week later when you want to release it.
Yeah, so this is just some behind-the-scenes insight because this is our podcast, so I don't think any other episodes of One and Done are really going to have this much insight, but
no.
These are definitely negatives to this podcast.
Also, you probably want to have more than one microphone.
Oh, yeah.
The audio quality in this episode was just absolute garbage. My favorite part of this episode actually was when I was talking about how garbage the audio quality was on An Unearthly Child, and I was like, look who's talking, buddy. Sounds like you ran your audio through a toaster.
I mean, the audio quality isn't the only problem. The audio itself is just basically not... It's not an interesting discussion, especially with the 10-second segments of silence that just show up every couple of minutes. Yeah,
there was a lot of editing mistakes that really hurt me real bad because I was listening to this while I was walking my dog, and I think I doubled over in pain every time I heard which I cut out now. And also, my voice sounds very, very weird on that first episode, and It's largely because we were recording on one microphone and also because I didn't know how audio compression or editing worked. So I sound like I've been run through a tin can in that first episode, which sounds very bad.
Anyway, apart from sort of technical stuff, what did we know about Doctor Who back then to create an interesting first episode where we discuss an unearthly child with intelligence and a knowledge of the show? Basically nothing.
Yeah, I had watched one season of the reboot at that point, and that was my base of knowledge. That was, in fact, the entire base of knowledge for the entire show, because Keon hadn't watched any Doctor Who at all.
I watched nothing, yet I had the audacity to rail into aspects of the show that I knew nothing about. Had no familiarity with the production of the show. Had no familiarity, even less familiarity than I do now with TV making in the 60s.
We railed pretty hard into the fact that it was black and white because we thought there was color film back then. And then we didn't. Apparently, we didn't know that they filmed on videotape. It wasn't a matter of color film or not. It was. Yeah, that was an interesting discussion. Also, I called Robin Gardner at least twice. Yeah. And I can actually explain this. I know where I got the name Robin Gardner, and it was because, and the only reason at all that I remember this is because by sheer coincidence, 2 days ago, before I listened again to our first episode, I was talking with a friend about this Titanic conspiracy. And the long and short of it is, in high school, I read this book called The Great Titanic Conspiracy, and it was written by this guy, Robin Gardner, and I'm almost certain I was reading that book when we started the podcast, so that is where I picked up that name.
Wow. That's a story.
So that was a devastating mistake. I cringed when I heard that.
Yeah, I was really hard listening to this. I mean, I think when we get to different podcasts, it's going to be easier railing into the bad things other people do. But I couldn't listen to more than 2 seconds of us messing up at like a time.
I listened to this all at once. I put my headphones in, I grabbed my dog and went for a walk, and I think by the end of it, I was regretting my decision.
Yeah, but speaking of music, we also, I think, rail pretty hard into the music in this. I mean, we don't like appreciate it. The Doctor Who theme, we mentioned that it's like an early piece of electronic music and like how iconic it is and how important it is in history, I guess. But we also like rail into it really hard without giving it the credit that it's due.
Yeah, we tore it apart, but I think we also said, hey, we really like it. I think we were tearing it apart just because we didn't understand.
Yeah, a lot of our faults for this episode were that we just were completely uninformed, which is not an excuse. We shouldn't have started a podcast that we weren't ready for.
There's also, it's just brilliant. This was so brilliant. We were talking about the title sequence, and we said it looked like a lava lamp zoomed up, and I think I said, yeah, you can tell the special effects are really bad when you can tell what it is, except it's not a lava lamp at all. So the special effects are actually brilliant, because we had no clue at all what it actually was. It was actually a video camera pointed at the screen that was showing the footage from the video camera. So that was pretty devastating. I didn't remember how weird Susan was in those episodes. It was interesting to hear us talk about how weird Susan was.
I also don't know how I guess, had the audacity again to just swear repeatedly on a podcast that isn't marked explicit.
That was something that actually was brought up by my dad, who listened to the first episode, and he was like, you guys should probably not swear so much or mark it explicit. And then I was like, we should probably not swear so much, because that
was mainly me.
We dropped a couple F-bombs in there.
It was me.
I was actually considering going back and marking just that episode explicit, because now I'm wondering if someone's going to complain.
Nah, it's fine.
No one really cares, which is correct, really. No one should really care about that episode.
I think that also sums up our attitude when we started making this podcast, both towards the podcast itself and to Doctor Who, is that we just didn't care.
which is a bummer because we clearly care quite a bit now.
Yeah.
We put a lot of effort into it now, I would say. But most of it is practice, though. That first episode is basically textbook example, first podcast from two noobs who don't know how to make a podcast. We didn't know how to end the episode. That's another thing I noticed, is that we finished the description of the plot in 17 minutes and then somehow just railroad into the story for 23 more minutes. And then even then, we hadn't thought of how to end the episode, so it ends with, hey, should we think of how to end this episode right now? Yeah, I don't know, maybe we should. Which is, that's the kind of stuff you should cut out in an episode.
Yeah, and then I literally said F it, except I didn't censor myself. And then it ended.
Well, you said the end, which is where that came from. I always actually wondered where we came up with the end. And now I realize it was you ad-libbing something at the end of the first episode.
Oh, God.
Oh, it's just a very poor effort. You know, we should go into the good things about it.
But I don't think we can, because there really are none.
Well, I mean, it runs and it downloads. That's an accomplishment.
It works as it's supposed to on a technical level, I guess.
It works.
So that's one and done, our new podcast.
Yeah, well, we're going to end here with our recommendation of if we can continue listening or not. And I pretty much unequivocally wouldn't.
Yeah, no, this is an absolute no.
I even tweeted about it. I wouldn't even listen. I'm glad that people actually stuck around after that train wreck of an episode.
Yeah. So, no, do not listen to this. Don't listen to Trust Your Doctor. I hear it gets better around the 100-episode mark.
Yeah, I hear it gets better. But I just wouldn't have the patience to get there, really.
So yeah, this is definitely a one and done. And yeah, I guess that's sort of our format. That's what most of these episodes are going to be.
Yeah, we're going to be releasing every Sundays, replacing Trust Your Doctor. Probably run through all the Doctor Who podcasts pretty quickly at that rate, so probably be a pretty short podcast. Maybe we'll move on to other things. Maybe we'll do Blake 7 or something.
If you have a Doctor Who podcast, you're not safe. Your head is on the chopping block. If you're out there, we will review you as harshly as we deem necessary.
Even if you're a complete podcast, we're still gonna
I'm gonna come after you.
Still in the crosshairs. We're coming after you. So yeah, you can email us still at thedoctor@decorative.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters. Your thoughts on One and Done? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Are you upset that we ended Trust Your Doctor? It just honestly wasn't worth it anymore.
I mean, even if you are upset, it's not coming back. It's not going to change anything.
Yeah, so it just wasn't worth it. And you can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Google Play at you'll find us at One and Done eventually. It's not set up yet, so you have to wait for it to set up. But for now, we'll just release on the Trust Your Doctor feed, so you can just stay subscribed.
Yeah, and I'm too lazy to switch over the social media stuff, so you can still find us on Facebook at Trust Your Doctor, like us on Facebook, and check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast, and follow us on Twitter. And next time, we're going to be reviewing... No, all right, this, if you couldn't already tell, this is just an April Fool's joke.
Yeah, this was the only April 1st release for one of our episodes for the next, 6 years, so we wanted to take advantage of it to do something fun.
Trust Your Doctor's not over. It's coming back tomorrow with the episode that should have gone out today.
The proper episode will release tomorrow, and it's a very long one. It's like an hour and a half at least. So it's a nice
Utopia, big, Sound of Drums, and Last of the Time Lords.
Big Trust Your Doctor fix this week.
One and Done isn't a real podcast.
No, this was all just an April Fool's joke. Just something fun. Right,
and this stemmed from, well, like we mentioned, us wanting to do something for April Fools. And also, I think, I mainly wanted to revisit that first episode because I remembered how bad it was.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, I was still shocked with how awful it really was. I mean, a lot of this stuff, we said it in a joking way, but a lot of the stuff we said in this episode is actually applicable to Trust Your Doctor episode 1. It just really isn't a good episode.
No, it's not. And, listening to it, I was amazed, actually, at how far we've come podcasting, which is mostly down to practice and just getting better at, I think, picking up each other's thoughts and sentences. A lot of the first episode was a lot of silence because I think neither of us knew when to talk or when to stop talking, and I think we got a lot better at figuring that out, and I got a lot better at audio editing, so the episodes sound way, way better audio quality-wise now.
Although we still record with basically the same setup, although we actually have 2 mics now and pop filters.
Yeah, well, we had one mic with no pop filter for the first episode, which is why, Keon and I sound vastly different noise-wise. We picked up a second mic around episode 3 to 4, and ever since then it's been a game of trying to equalize our voices so we sound the same volume. And so we sound normal. If you listen to that first episode, I wasn't joking when I sound very odd. Especially if you go back and listen to like episode 193 and then compare it, I sound very different in the 2 episodes. Keon less so, although Keon as well. And yeah,
part of that is just because we started this in high school,
that's the other
changed.
Thing. Our voices did change quite a bit, apparently. It's always difficult for me editing these episodes because I don't know how my voice actually sounds to everybody else, so it's difficult for me to actually get my voice sounding right because I don't know what it's supposed to sound like. Like Keon's I can get because I know what Keon sounds like. Me? No, I've got no idea, so...
Anyway, after listening to this, we sort of jokingly said, oh God, we need to do the first 100 episodes of this podcast over again to make it, acceptable. And we're not doing that, but, we were sort of throwing ideas around and, you might see a revamped episode 1 at some point, an episode 1 redux. I think we both want to sort of revisit that episode and maybe even the Daleks as well and just do those first 2 episodes over and really give the beginning of the show the justice it deserves and not really and hopefully not turn people off listening to the podcast if they start from episode 1 or something.
Yeah, because the other thing is that people who start listening from episode 1, I feel like they get a skewed interpretation of what the podcast is now because much like Doctor Who, we've changed quite a bit over the years. Actually, rather gradually, but comparing episode 1 to episode 193 or 4, there is quite a drastic difference between it. And I think people who listen to just episode 1 will be misled into a certain mindset about what the podcast is and what we do and how crappy it is. And how sweary it is, because we swore quite a bit on that first episode. Swore like sailors.
It was me. It was basically only me.
I mean, I swore a couple times too.
I was the only one dropping F-bombs.
That's true, though. And so we may go back and do that again. Do it better.
I feel like these 2 episodes are really important to Doctor Who itself and TV in general in the 60s as well. Mm-hmm. And we just didn't give them the justice that they deserved.
No,
didn't talk about them in any intelligent manner. So.
We made a lot of factual errors. We did have a very long discussion in the first episode about where the show was going to go, and a lot of it is trite and uninteresting. And I think we still make factual errors now, but I think we tend to try and avoid talking about things and mentioning things we don't know. And I think we don't know, we typically are pretty good at saying, I don't know the specifics of this, check the show notes or something.
And we actually care now. That's another huge thing. I'll speak for myself, I guess. I actually care now. I didn't care when this first episode came out. I really didn't.
Yeah, I care quite a bit now too, which is why I actually put a lot more effort into editing these things, which is why I cut out all the ums and ahs and all the throat clearing and all the coughing and the sneezing and the silence. I try to make the episodes actually feel like just one long conversation now, which is difficult, but it's worth it, so it makes the episodes better, which is what we want. But yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed this self-deprecating 20-minute episode of quote-unquote one and done.
Yeah, and you might, in the future, see Unearthly Child and Daleks redone.
Yeah, potentially. It's, we'll see. It depends on if we have time and when we have time, actually.
Yeah. Really,
not if. It's pretty much a matter of when. And, so... In all seriousness, you can email us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, thoughts on our first episode. Oh God, if you go back and listen to it, may God help you all. Like I said, our proper episode will go out tomorrow at the usual time, so 9 o'clock Pacific. And you can find us on Decorative. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable, and you can find us on Apple Podcasts and Google Play at Trust Your Doctor. Leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And like we've already said, Utopia, Sound of Drums, and Last of the Time Lords is going out tomorrow. But until then, the end.